Hello everyone. In today's training session, this one is continue from our last session, in which we have covered basically a few concepts in X++ and data structures used in Dynamics 365 Finance and Operation. And the concept which we have covered in previously were like base enums. Base enums as describe a structure just like a short integer with a literal value for showing it as a user friendly literals, and those are best practice when you want to compare certain the parameters, or you want to compare it instead of free text free text value which you are comparing, which is not recommended. So always use base enums with multiple values, and the system is already using so many base enums which you can take for example. So I have also explained briefly about EDTs. EDTs are extended data types, and in this session we will cover about EDT. So basically the EDT is user defined data types, which are basically extension of existing base types. So those base types can be integer, string, or other types like date and other types. And extending means those are extending the properties such as appearance, behavior, or the size, or any of relationship with the tables. So that's why this is called extended data types. So we can just have an example of certain data types, like we can go to vend account. So this vend account is basically used in vend table when vendor account number is defined. So basically this is further having properties such as string size is of 20, and then it is also extending the base type like cust vend AC, cust vend account. So this is further extending the other EDT type, and that we can also see here. So this cust vend account is further, this is the base type for the vend account type. So the name is clearly here mentioned, and then the label property is mentioned, which is a text or caption value shown when ADT is used in a field. And then string size is also available as a property here, and this is further extending external account type. So that external account is this one, and you can see this EDT can be extended further with another EDT, and then it can go on and on. So there is ultimately this external account is no further extension to any other EDT, and this external account is the top base EDT or top most parent, and it is having a string size of 20. So in this way the EDTs are extended from one another, and we can also see label size or table relationship information within an EDT, and those are basically extension. I mean the relationship with the other with the table in which it is defined, in which the field is extending from this EDT type. So relationship can also be defined in EDT, and there are other properties which are also provide us the consistency and understanding within the data model. So there is another EDT type which is of name type, which is also used and used frequently, and you can see here the string size is 60 for this name EDT, and then it is not extending from any other EDT type, and since the length is 60, so this is definitely a string data type. From this you can get that this is a string data type because integer and real other they don't have the string size property. So in this way we can identify various EDT types. And if we want to change the string size property of the field, so all the fields based on this EDT will be adjusted, and if we reduce the size, it will truncate the value to the new size. So I will just start with an EDT in order to show you how it is created. Just right click on project and go to add a new item, and then go to the data types. You can see here just like base enum, the EDT of various primitive type are shown here. So I will just create one EDT, and I will put a name here, like we were working in a resort table, so I will create a resort ID as a EDT. You can see here in the folder PKR a resort ID has been created already, and so this EDT we can see in the properties here. So string size by default is given 10, and then if I can show you extends, it does not extends for now because this is a new extended data type. So we can just extend it from an EDT which is called num. I will show you this EDT as well. This is of a string type. On the left hand side you can see this num, and it is having a label in sys label, and having a string size of 20. So, and then of course the label is there, and it is not further extending any other EDT. So basically this num EDT, we have extended this in our resort ID here, and in the last example I have created a table here, and in the table, excuse me, and in the table we can see there are two fields here uh, extending from base enum. So even base enum EDT can extend a base enum, and then that EDT can be dropped in a field. So same way like EDT can be directly dropped. So now once I have defined this resort ID, so what I can do is I can just drag and drop in the fields, and then I can rename the field in order to remove the prefix here, and using alter and up arrow or down arrow I can adjust the sequence of the field. So this resort ID is basically now defined here as a key value. What we can do is now we can assign a label, even though we have extended this from uh, extended the EDT from num label, and the label which is used in num, once we are not defining in the child EDT the label value, so it will inherit the label property from the parent of EDT. So in this way all the properties which are not set in the child EDT will be extended from the parent EDT. So there is one more thing which you need to just check here, that this resort ID is basically having only few. Let me go to the resort ID here. In the resort ID you can see in the property there is label and help text which is empty here, and string size value is not enabled, means it is now disabled when we extend certain EDT. So we cannot change the string size later on. So what we can do is just try here remove this extends property, and now you can see this is editable. So what happens if we define our own one more EDT extending the resort ID? So let us see. Just for the sake of experimentation, I will just create here a test EDT. I will remove it. So that already exists. So give it another name like PKR test. And now I'm extending this with my resort ID EDT. Now even now you can see the string size value is disabled. So it means whenever you inherit one EDT from another EDT, so that EDT if it is a string type, so the value is not a value of length, string length is not editable until it is not extending any parent EDT. So then you can only adjust the string size value here. So I will just again extend it from num. And now let me define the labels for our EDT, and I will just define a resort ID label and resort ID help text, which can be like a unique reference for the resort record. So this will be the help text which will put in the EDT. Just copy the ID and go to the EDT, and in just find the label property and paste it there, and similarly just copy the help text and go to the help text property and just paste our value or ID value there and just save it. And now we have what we have achieved so far, that we have created an EDT of type string, and we have extended that EDT with another EDT of string type called num. And since we know that now, since once the string EDT, the child EDT is extending a parent EDT, so the child EDT, the string length cannot be changed in the child EDT. And then we can also define, I mean, the label and help text in the child EDT. And if we don't define the labels here, so the labels used in this EDT will be from the parent EDT, that is num here. So whatever the label IDs for label and help text will be shown from the parent EDT if we don't define it in the child EDT. So now it is very clear that in this way you can create an EDT. Then there is a property which is a table, not a property but a node, table references in EDT. So we'll just show you one example here, which is of asset ID EDT. So I will open in a designer here, and you can see the table references contains asset ID equals to asset table dot asset ID. So basically this asset ID EDT is used as a primary key in asset table, and the field value which is that the field in the table defined which is extending this EDT is basically asset ID. In this way we can define, you know, the relationship with the table when EDT when the relationship is defined within the EDT, and relationship can also be defined within the table. Now just we can move to EDT properties, and in the EDT which we have created, like resort ID, I will go to here in reference table in the main EDT node. I have put here the resort table as a reference table. So what is the benefit of this defining as a resort table? That then I can just put in the table references, define the reference here, and automatically this table name will be populated once I have defined it in the main property of EDT, that is a reference table. So once the reference table is filled up here, then I can pick a field which already exists in that table, which I have removed. Now I will again create it. Just let me remove this and also remove this one. And now I will drag and drop this field again and just rename it and remove the prefix. Now we can open the EDT. In the reference table, I can put here the name of table, which is PKR resort table, and then I can again create this table references here, and in there I can just put the basically the field name is not appearing right now. No, I have actually not saved this table here. So once I have saved the table, now I can go to table references and open the related field, and now I can select the resort ID here, and now the reference is filled up here. So in this way we have defined the relationship of this EDT to the table. So what is difference when we define a relationship on the EDT instead of a table? Already there is a table, and the relationship is can also be defined here. So basically the difference is the relationship which we define on the EDT. Basically whenever you drop this EDT as a control on a form element, which will also cover in future videos about user interface development, and we'll see how the form can be developed using different patterns. So when you drag and drop this EDT as a control over a form, so that control will automatically show a lookup based upon the values which are already defined using this relationship on a reference table. A reference table you already know that we have defined on a EDT. So based upon this relationship is that when we drop a certain EDT on a table on a form control, so automatically the lookup values are retrieved from the tables which is from the table which is defined on EDT. So this is one of the benefit when we define it on a EDT. And the table, normally the best practice is to define a table relationship only in the table when we need to define a parent and child relationship or primary and foreign key relationship. So the best practice is to define the relationship on the table level itself. So after this, we have what we have achieved is that we have defined a primary key field value where we define the EDT and the relationship on the EDT. So what other benefit do the EDTs offer us? So basically when as we have already seen that an EDT can be extended further from a parent EDT, and that can go and on and on. So whenever for example a string type of EDT, if the base EDT we change the length of string size, so automatically over the synchronization the all the EDTs or child EDTs which are extended from the parent, automatically their lengths are uh, extended, increase based upon the base EDT. So whatever the length changes we perform over the base EDT, normally it is we increase the length, normally we do not reduce the length. What are the consequences if we reduce the length? So definitely the fields, table fields which are extending those EDTs will reduce truncate the data or the value held in that field. So that is not recommended practice to reduce the length of the EDT. So this is one of the benefit that the characteristic of parent EDT is automatically shifted to the child EDT when you extend EDTs from the parent. And now we will also see some of the reference, ADT types which are normally used whenever an ADT is extended, because normally whenever you will be creating the table, so you should create your own ADT. It is also a best practice, so that if you are using an existing ADT, what will happen when Microsoft or ISV independent solution vendor will change the EDT properties. So definitely your field will also inherit those properties. So it is always a good practice to create your own EDT. So normally if you want to even extend the EDTs, so what are those EDT? EDTs which we normally are using. So there is, we have already covered that there are certain table group, like one in which we define a grouping information. So like customer group, or can be a vendor group, or item group, or item model group. So there the ID value normally is extended from a EDT called sys group. So I can show you. So this is item group ID on the left hand side in Application Explorer. You can see this is item group ID. Once I open it in a designer, and on the right hand side you can see the EDT is extended from sys group EDT. So these are normally sys group EDT is one of the EDT which is used for primary key fields for group tables. So group tables are those, as I explained, that whenever the grouping information are kept, and those are having only a few fields, so that those are kind of a group tables. As we also explained in our previous training video, you can also refer there. They can also provide further definition to a record, or can be also used for reporting. And the examples I have already shown you: item group ID. Similarly, you can also see customer group. So this is customer group ID, and I can open it in the designer. You can see here that it also extend from sys group. So we'll also be creating a resort group or ID, and also its table. So we'll be using this sys group EDT. So it is very important whenever you create a EDT and you want to extend it from a base EDT, you must be knowing a few important EDTs when you extend your EDT from that one. So in the same way, if I can show you, and I would also explain that in this one item, for example, item group ID. So item group ID or cust group ID, you can see here in the cust group ID, actually it is referring the cust group table, and that can also be seen. So here in the properties you can see cust group table is basically using this EDT, and we can go to the table level also. Here it is cust group field, and it is using the EDT of cust group ID. And if we go to the relationship, so there are various relationships defined on this table level. So basically you can also see here and explore the indexes, various indexes which are used here, and you can see the group index value is, the group index is using this field also, the cust group, which is extending cust group ID EDT. And similarly all the indexes are using only a single field here. So these fields will be sorted. Meanwhile, we'll also explore until the browser opens. We'll also explore few other EDTs which are important, like NUM EDT, and uh, I need to just show you like sales ID. So sales ID is basically extending further sales ID base, and that is also located here, and ultimately this is extending the NUM EDT. So in the same way, if we can go to Purge ID, so Purge ID is extending Purge ID base, and then Purge ID base is extending the NUM EDT. So here the length is 20, also string size, and this is also frequently used. So whenever you define, for example, we have also defined here the resort ID, which we extend from num EDT or number EDT. Number is not actually number, basically it is string value, string based EDT. And then there is one called AccountNUM. Whenever you define customer account, you can go to the AccountNUM, and this is basically another kind of EDT which you can use in your just like a vendor account or customer account. So here is vendor account, which is vend account, and that is extending cust vend account basically. So we can also go to cust vend account, and it is further extending external account, and here it is external account, and external account is not further extending any other EDT. So basically account num is one of the field which we can use here. So basically the account num EDT which I have just shown you, this one account num, it can be used in cases when the primary key fields are for main tables such as customer table or the vendor table, so that can be used there in account num. I can show you. If we go to the cust table and we check here there is account num field here. So that is basically using extended data type, the cust account, and cust account, and these we have already seen. So in this way account num is basically EDT where we can use it for account numbers, and this is also 20 character string. So there is one more EDT which is name EDT, and this name EDT is having 60 length. Here it is having 60 length, and this can also be used when you can have the fields like naming fields, like for example resort name, if you can add here, so that will support up to 60 characters. And this is already been used in various places, like customer name also, or vendor name, and there are multiple places where this EDT is basically used. So then there is one EDT called description, and this one is also popularly used, and it is also supporting string size of 60 characters, and this can also be used for the description type of field or notes type of field on a group tables. So when you define a group, for example, we will be defining a resort group. So in that way, we will once we define the description field, so that will be extended from this EDT type. And normally this one is not extended, and it is used as is. So apart from this, there are two more EDTs called amount MST and amount cur. And amount MST is used for normally base currencies, and amount cur is used for transactional currency. So these two EDTs can be used whenever you want to extend or create a field which is having a currency amount or a currency number. So that can be extended from amount cur or amount MST. Amount cur, I need to just show you. This one is amount cur. So normally the tables like ledger journal trans, which is holding the lines of journal entry, like you can see here in ledger journal trans, there is amount credit and amount debit, and this can, you can see this is using extended data type of amount credit and amount debit. So that is further extending that basic EDT. So because now credit is on the right hand side and debit is on the left hand side, so in order to align that numeric value, so it is further extending and changing the behavioral property. So you can see here amount debit, and amount debit is further extending from amount cur. So in this way the properties are so this is a credit and then amount debit. So anyhow, there is one more EDT which is quantity, and whenever you want to define a quantity field type, so that can be used, this EDT can be used there. There are certainly full list of EDTs which we cannot cover in this session, but this can give you an idea. And there is also a hint that once you want to create something, you just need to explore the existing tables and fields and how those fields are extended from the existing EDTs or extended data types. So just let me close this. Now we need to also create one more table. Already we created a resort table. We need to also create one more table which is of type group. So just create a new item and go to the data model, and then select the table and just create here resort group. Just go ahead and create it. So the table is already created, and in this table we can just the property which we have explored last time, like table type is okay for us, and it can be a regular table. And then the table group, what do you think we should choose here? We have explained this concept in previous video. So we can choose here the group. Why? Because the group table we explained in previous video, will contain a table which will have only few limited fields. And this is an example, like already the vendor group or vend group or cust group, these kind of tables already is using the same table group. So this is the best practice. We can use this table group here. And what about resort table, what we have selected there? Again, to check it, yeah, we have selected the main. So this is correct, because now in the main, in order to provide a list of something, some items, vendor list, customer list, or in this case resort list, so we can use this main table. And we have already covered like worksheet header, worksheet line, and a simple worksheet will not have a pattern like header and lines, so worksheet will be that one. And then worksheet header and line means a pattern like common information will be held in header and line, like purchase table, purchase table, and purchase line. So that is an example. And transaction is definitely, then transaction header and line is posted transaction for the same thing. I mean, the transaction once posted can use transaction or transaction header and line. So transaction will have the pattern like only a single record without parent and child relationship. If it is having parent child, so parent will have transaction header and child will have transaction line. So other we have already covered, you can refer to my previous video. So I have created just this table, and I have selected the table group property. Other property regular already is there, and now I need to just create one EDT for this table as well, and that would be just go ahead with new item, and in the data types just go ahead with EDT of type string and give it a name like PKR resort group ID. So once you have created this EDT, now you can see there is a label and help text for this, and that we need to just define in our label file. So just go ahead and put here like resort group. So this will be resort group, and there will be help text resort group help text, and I will put here like this one is used to group resorts for sorting, filtering, and reporting. Just copy this label and paste in this label property of EDT. Yeah, just put here, and for the help text also we can put here. So this is how we have placed we have created the labels, and we have put there. And now what do you think, this EDT can extend which EDT further? So basically I have defined a few example EDTs. From there we can take an example again if we have forgot. So it is very simple, just go ahead with the vend group ID. So this is same way, like a vend group is a table, and then vend group ID is a primary key to that table. So here you can see the sys group is basically an EDT from which it is extended. So here also I need to extend my EDT from the sys group EDT. So just go ahead with extends property and put here sys group. Also, to ensure that it is available, sometime you need to refer the package if it is not available, because now this this is present in application suite, and that application suite group must be that package must be referred. So application platform is the basic package which must be referred in our model. So I will just show you the model which I have created, PKR model. Once we go to next, we can see here that application platform package is selected. Otherwise, this object will not be available in our properties. So it is very important to select the referred packages. The objects already contained in those packages should be referred. So now one more thing is we have created a resort ID here, and in the same way we have created a resort group table already created, but the EDT which we have created need to be also drag and drop in the resort group table. So what we can do is just drag and drop this EDT into the fields node of this table, and just remove the prefix, and just put resort group here. So now this field is already drag and drop here, and what we can do is, in the same way, we can define in the main EDT property, we can define a reference table here, and that reference table is going to be a resort group. And same way, in the table references, we can define a new reference, and there we can select a resort group ID as a field, and just save your changes. Now after doing this, we can add further new fields also, and an index. So what we need to do is just open the resort group table, and there you can see we have already defined resort group ID field, and now we need to add another field with the that should hold the name information about this resort group. So those can be either a description or name field. So I will prefer name here, and just go to the extended data type of name here, and just drag and drop in your field node, and automatically it will definitely, as drag and drop approach is more easy, so it will inherit the properties like extended data type, name, and the name itself. So you can also create by right clicking a field and choosing a string, and then you need to just rename it here. Like I will just rename it like name 2, and then you need to put here the properties like name. So this will be, multiple steps in to do the same thing. So it is better to just drag and drop once it is available. So I have already now created the field here. What we need to do is, now in order to create this as a primary key, so let me also show you in the SQL server that how this one is appearing, because last time we created the resort table and it created 4 fields. So definitely the rec ID is one of those fields which are not showing here, but definitely it is being created by the system automatically. So once that is a primary key, so there cannot be two primary keys defined in a single table. Then what will happen is you need to define alternate keys instead of a primary key, in order to ensure that that field should be indexed and it would contain unique values. So what we need to how we need to achieve that, we need to just create a new index. So that we can just right click and create a new index, and give it a name like resort group ID IDX. we can also remove the resort value, otherwise the name will be very long. And group IDX is also enough information here. And what we can do is just drag and drop the field here in the index which we have just created. So then we need to just declare this group ID group ID index, the alternate key as yes, and allow duplicate no. So definitely it is a default value, it will not allow duplicate, and this will be use an alternate key. So once we have done this, we can also switch certain values on the field level, and those are like allow edit. So allow edit is one of the property whenever you open a table or whenever you create put this table as a data source to a form, and then uh, put as a control on the as a form control. So whenever you create a new record, so automatically whether the control should be editable or it should not be editable. So then there is allow edit on create. So there is a difference between these two properties. So this one is allow edit on create, means first time the record is inserted, at that time it is allow edit true. So then it should be yes, allow edit, otherwise it should be no. So this is only true for alternate key, like we have defined here resort group ID. We will not be we will only want it to be editable once we first time are inserting a record. So once it is inserted, it should not be editable. So that's why allow edit should be no, but allow edit on create should be yes. And what about mandatory? Mandatory is definitely yes for a alternate key, because it should not be optional here. So these are further properties which we have set to an alternate key. Now there are certain more properties which we need to set also in the table level, on the table level. So those are also very important, and we need to cover as well. Like there is a resort group, so that resort group table should also have a label property, and then there can be title field property. So when what is the title field 1 and title field 2 properties? Basically these two fields are basically we need to define here the existing fields available in the table when automatic titles are generated based upon this table, when this table is used as a title data source. So these fields are only relevant for those, and it should be set up, I mean, here. So what we need to set up here, title field 1 should be the ID value itself, that is alternating key, that is resort group ID, and title field 2 should be basically the name. And if I want to just show you an example, because all the examples you can take care, whenever you are creating a new thing, you should take care about existing examples, so that you will always follow the best practice. So it is not always like you find a best practice whenever you go to any of the table, but although it is most of the time it is correct that you will find the best practice already implemented. So here you can see the title field 1 is set cust group, and title field 2 is set as a name. So this is the correct example, and it's similar to resort group. So we can take an example of a similar kind of table. So that is now defined, and now we need to define also the label property here. So let me go to the label file, and we can see here if there is an existing label with the same thing which is already there, and but we need to have a plural value here. So what we need to do is we need to create another label, which is resort group and resort groups will be the correct label here. I will just copy and also save it. So once we have defined the label and title fields, then we need to also check about what are the other properties. So the next property is cache lookup property in the table, and I will just open the lookup, and you can see here there is none, not in TTS, and there is a found and found in empty or entire table. So this property is helping in building a cache. Cache is definitely for efficiency or performance boost up, so that every time a full round trip is not required, and the record once cache is built up, so the record is retrieved from just from the cache. So what about if there is some update happens? So anyhow, I will explain one by one. So this is none, and none means no caching is fetched from the DB every time. So whenever from the DB the record is selected, so it will not cache, it will not build up any cache from DB every time. So then there is not in TTS. So that is fetched once per transaction. So every time there is a transaction happening, so it will build the cache only once. And then there is a found, and a found means cache is built once it is found. I mean the record is found. So it will not look up from the record once again. Uh, and then there is a found and empty. So that is also covering, I mean, the similar only, except there is also an empty record. And then the entire table, which is not recommended because it will load the whole cache into memory. So the cache will be only invalidated when the record is flushed or updated. So entire table is not at all recommended. So we'll choose here found, and found is cached once found. So it will not look up once again. So then there is a cluster index, and the cluster index is basically is created as a basically is a cluster index is useful when they include the entire record in the index. So in the index, when the whole record is there, the cluster index basically keep all the record in the index, avoiding a bookmark lookup, and this makes them efficient. But the key should always increment, such as for example in Purge ID or sales ID. Whenever in the sales ID and Purge ID, number sequence is used, which you'll learn also. Number sequence is basically a sequential number generated from the D365 system. So in sales order ID or Purge ID, the number is incremental. So it should be always used for incremental number. Otherwise, it will need to reorganize the whole index once a new record is inserted. So since this is a small table, because only there are two fields we have just so far included, and we don't foresee that in future more, even if more one or two extra fields will be inserted. So it will not cause any performance issue here, but definitely like InventTrans is a very huge table, and similarly InventTrans origin and the same, means wherever the table is having more records, heavy records, huge records, so that need to not set this cluster index. So this will also basically cluster index will also help in sorting the table. So that will be in ordered way. So what we need to select in cluster index here is basically we'll select the index just what we created, that is a group ID index. And then there is a primary index. So what is the primary index? Basically the primary index is basically, it defines a primary index that is a unique key, and that is also used whenever you are creating foreign key joins with this table. So that is a primary key here, and here we also need to choose our group ID index. So then there is a table group, and normally for the group table, already we explained in previous training videos also about various grouping. So we already selected this value, and then there is certain fields like to keep track or for audit purpose. These are whenever required should be enabled, otherwise it will also because of audit it will also hit the performance. So for the huge table, but for a smaller table it will not impact any significantly. So created by, whenever a new record is inserted, so whoever has inserted the record, his user ID will be also put in the field of created by. So then there is a created date and time, and created date and time will also keep track about timestamp whenever the new record has been inserted. And same is with modified also. There is also modified by and modified date and time whenever there is an update performed by some user, so that will be held, and also along with that timestamp will also be kept. Excuse me. Then we can check here the developer documentation, and we can get an example from any existing table. For example, this is a event group, and here you can see a label is there. We can find this from the label file. Basically, the developer documentation is required for best practices and should contain information that the other developers should understand about the table. So basically technical details. So here we can see the vend group table contains definition of vendor group. So in the same way we can we can just copy this, and in our label file we can put a developer documentation. This is the best practice. So instead of this label ID, so basically it is not copy pasting, so I will just type the pkr resort group table contains definition of resort groups. So DD for developer documentation, and we'll just copy and put in the developer documentation property. So this is just for the sake of best practices, and also for as a reference for the next developer who need to get an idea what this table basically do. And then there is a form reference. and basically this is used whenever there is a form associated with this table. So for the user interface, we need to define this one. So right now there is no form, so we'll keep it empty until we define a form for this property. So basically here, instead of form, we need to put a display menu item basically, which is opening the form. So the reference of that display menu item need to be present here. So whenever you want to view the details in the user interface, it is the property that is used to determine which form should be opened. So we need to just create form and display menu item and then put the display menu item reference here. So this is all about the main properties. So now we need to explore. There are other nodes as well. After we have explored the properties, after we know already there is a fields node where we can drag and drop the fields. Then there is a field group, and basically there are a certain field group which are already existing. So whenever you add a new field, so as a best practice, it is always recommended to add a new group against to cover those fields. So there are multiple benefits of including a field group. Basically, one is a group for the grouping purpose, logical grouping purpose. The other one is whenever field group can be drag and drop on a form level, and that will create a separate grouping of logical grouping when you see the user interface. So here only there are two fields, so we'll just drag and drop into the newly created group, and then we need to also create the label property for the group here. So since this is a very common group, just we'll can use a sys label. So we can just go ahead with our label file, and we can find and match exactly here to in order to find whatever the label is exactly matching here. So here the oldest sys label we can just copy here, and we can place in our label in the properties, and in this way we have included the overview using the sys labels, which are basically on sys layer. And there is an auto lookup here whenever this table is used in the lookups. So the fields will be shown there. So we need to also drag and drop and just place it in auto lookup. And also there is no harm if we put in auto report. And so whenever there will be automatic lookups for this table, so it will show both of the fields, including resort group ID and the name. Both field will be shown in auto lookup. You must have seen the lookup, just I have covered in my previous session when the records from a table are showing. So this automatic lookup group will be then used. Now there are we can skip to our we have covered the indexes as well, and now we can go to the methods node here. So in the method node there are certain methods which are important to exist, and those method you can easily uh, use from the existing table and just change the definition. So that will be easy approach for you. And there is an exist method, and then there is a find method. So what is the difference is find method will return a full table buffer or table record based upon the alternate key ID or the rec ID, and similarly exist will only just return true or false whether the past ID value currently exists in that table. So what we need to do is just go to the vent group. You will find the same method here in the vent group. So just open it in a designer, and just view the code of exist. So you can see here it is a simple definition. We'll just copy the find and exist method from here, and also there is check exist method, which is also useful method. And so we'll just copy these two methods. And also check exist. Just copy it and go to the and create here the new method. Once you are in the method here, just paste it here, whatever you have copied, and just remove the existing one, and keep the documentation, and even remove the documentation. Now in this method you can see there is a parameter when group ID, so we can use here the resort group ID. So this is resort group ID, and then we can change it to resort group, and then we can just replace this selectively, and also to replace this table name here, which is basically using the exist method. So let me first replace all the parameters, and the indentation is also a best practice. Always keep a very neat and clean code with good indentation with the tab key, so that every time it is very clear code for the new developers. Also should be no extra space. There should be one space between the variable type and variable name when it is in the parameter. And I need to just put here the table name, which is resort group table, and same table name I can be placing it here as a return type of find method. So this will be returning a table buffer, and then here also inside the method body, and then in the resort group also, this resort group need to be also placed here. And resort group here also I have placed, and with the parameter in the parameter as well. And this resort group I am placing here. So then in the x plus plus I need to uh, so it will be resort group ID, which is being passed, and this will be returning. So this method looks complete, and then we need to check here. Yeah, there is a update required in this method. Resort group, same condition, and here the resort group which is passed, it will be replaced here. And now I think the whole thing is complete, and now I will explain as well. First of all, the find method, whenever you pass a parameter like a resort group ID value here, and it can be for update. For update means whether the record is selected for update or not. So if I assign inside the parameter a value, so that makes that parameter optional value, and same is for this one. So it means you only need to provide this mandatory value resort group, and if you want to also select that for update, so you need to pass with comma a true parameter whenever you call this method. So once it is there, so there is a resort group dot select for update, and for update is passed from here. If it is true, so it will be passed, otherwise it is false. So if it is true, and concurrency control is also checked here, and then it will be it is already selected for true here, and concurrency model is selected in the inside this if condition. And after this, you can see here the main thing is here. Basically, also I need to replace this one vendor group. Now resort group which is passed here is now put in the where clause in order to filter the criteria, filter as a filter criteria. So this will return only a single record, because I this is selected only first only, means only single record is returned, and that record is then returned, and the return type is our table type. So this is a static method, means there is no instantiation, and definitely this is a table method here. Actually, it is basically a class, but this method does not require any instance, so the find will return a table buffer. So in the same way, exist will return a boolean value whether true or false. So if it is true, then definitely record will be returned here. So if rec ID will have some value, non-zero value. So if it is non-zero value, that is again check here, and if it is non-zero, so it means it is true and record exists, so that will return true, otherwise it will return false. And similarly, check exist used the same logic of exist, because it is calling the exist method internally. So if it does not exist, so it will return a record does not exist method here, and that need to be also implemented, and we need to replace this one. So just replace here, and text not exist need to be a method also. So now we can just end up this training session, and for that we just need to save our files. Uh, just close whatever we open for references, and asset ID, resort ID, and label is, just close the label file as well. And since now we have performed data dictionary changes, for that I already explained in my previous session as well, that just right click on the properties and synchronize database on build should be true, and then once it is built, so the table will be created on at the back end, and then we can turn it to false again. Just let me open the SQL Management Studio and see about existing tables. Just go to database node and AXDB node, and then the expand tables node, and then just right click on it and go to the filter settings, and put a condition like the name should contain pkr, which is our prefix which I have used here, and it will then filter it out, so that it is easy for us to check and manage. We created this in our previous example, and you can see there are two fields already, and there is a third field which we created in this example, which is resort ID, and this is the alternate key field. Also we need to just let me complete this one as well, because now in this way, this will also contain a name field, similarly like a group table. So let me finish this one in the same way, resort group ID and name, and then this index. Let me also rename this index as group index. Okay, and I just need to put another field here, and that also I can just replace, just drag and drop name field. So this will now contain resort type. There are two field, cost wise and location wise. Resort type, resort ID. I can just correct the sequencing by alter and up arrow and down arrow, and then just I will create a field group here as well. Overview, and I will just open the other table here and just copy the same label quickly, and now I will drag and drop all the fields in overview, as well as I will also place all the fields in auto lookup as well as in auto report. Okay, once I'm done with this, then of course there is one more thing here which I need to also cover, that is a relationship. So basically resort ID will definitely contain, resort ID will itself lie inside a resort group. So I need to just define a relationship of a resort to a resort group. So what I need to do is just go to the relations and just right click and create a new relation. So what we'll create here is a foreign key relation. Just go ahead with the instead of a foreign key, I will just create the normal relationship, because the in the foreign key what happens, I will just show you. I will just pick the table which is resort group, and related table cardinality is 0 and 1. It should be not 0 and 1, exactly 1. So it means that for each of the resort table record, a resort group must exist. So that is the exactly one role here. And then relationship type should be it should be association, and that I will select here. And in order to put this as a logical name, should be resort group, in order to represent the name of the table. So basically name of the table is PKR resort group, so I will just keep the same. And then I need to just right click and create a normal relationship here. And in the normal relationship, what I can select is a value here about against the field group. So for that value, what I need to do is I can just uh, create this. In this way, I created this resort group field here, and now I can refer this field in the field here, resort group, and the related field in the foreign key table will be resort group ID, so which is unique there. So now our relationship is complete here. And cardinality we have not yet defined, that need to be uh, how many records can exist here. It can be 0 or more. Why? Because there cannot be any record also against a resort group ID here, but it can, if it exists, it can be multiple even. So that's why 0 or more. Otherwise 0 or 1 if it is only 1, or there is no. And exactly 1 when it must exist. So I will choose just 0 or more. So EDT relationship is basically when it is defined in EDT. That can also be true here, because EDT already contain a relationship. So just I will save now. And now what is the next step? Next step is to just build this project. So we have already, let me once again check the overview field group. Yeah, it is already there, but the sequencing is a little bit wrong. I will correct the sequencing. So there need to be also the methods which should also exist here. So what I can do is just go to resort group and just yeah, last time there was one more missing that I need to also cover here. That is in check exist method. There was text txt ot exist. Let me check in the table. This is text not exist method, and let me open this. So it is just returning a label that the text label for record is not existing. So just we need to implement this. Just let me go back and copy, paste it here. So it is saying vendor group does not exist, but in our case, resort group does not exist, and the number should also be given, so it would be %1. Not found text. I will just put it just like this one and copy it, and I will replace it in this one. What I need to do also in our other table, we need to implement the same method. So it is giving me a syntax error. Let me first build this. So now there are multiple errors. So there is txt not exist. It is saying there is cannot be resolved to non-type name does not designate a class or table. So pkr resort group id, yeah, that is correct. So that I need to fix it. I will just replace this id. And what about table resort group is not found? Okay. Okay, now I think it should be fixed. Yeah, all the errors have been gone. And so best practices errors are there. So we'll fix it one by one. Not now, but later on. So that is suggesting that a field cannot relate to itself through an EDT. Set the ignore EDT relation property to yes. So that is in the resort table, which we just put here in the relationships. So and here EDT relationship is done to no, and there is here ignore EDT relationship should be turned to yes. So it will use the relationship used in the table itself. So anyhow, these are best practices check, and then we need to also create the same methods here also. So what we'll do, just create it so that the class is also generated. And so basically resort group has not been declared here. That we can also check in this was exist method, so we can go to exist method and view the code. So basically what we can do is just declare here the resort pkr resort group table buffer and just declare it. So due to this the error will be gone, because that need to be. Let me once again build. So I have just changed here in the select statement when it is in the return statement. So there is no need of declaring the table buffer. So directly just put the table name here, and then the error will go, and it means the table buffer does not need required to be declared here when it is within the return statement itself, the only statement. So once we are done here, we can just copy all the methods, copy and paste in a resort table class. What we can do is a simple way. just replace this one, Control H and PKR resort table. No, this one should be resort group ID, so resort ID. So this will be resort ID, which is our EDT type. So we'll just we say replace all, and there were three instances which were replaced, and similarly a resort group need to be replaced with the resort actually we cannot replace this otherwise, because this is a part of also the table name. So first of all we need to replace the table, which will be resort table. Just replace all, and resort table has been replaced, and now we can go ahead with the resort group, and that is resort table. Just replace. Now you can see there are certain problems here. So resort ID, this need to be resort ID, and that we need to take care specifically. Here also resort ID, and then here also it is resort ID, and this need to be, let me, resort table, and this should be resort ID, and here also need to be resort ID, and here also it need to be resort table. So these adjustments you need to do, later on once you replace it. Now you can see the also here you need to replace resort table. So once we save, if there are any error, it will show automatically. It does not look any error so far, so it means everything is okay. So these are the basic methods which need to exist, and now what we need to do is just close. Just open this once more. I think there is a text not exist, so this need to be also replaced. So I will just resort table not found txt, and here I can just copy this and place here resort table resort number. This does not exist, so it will just show resort ID not found. So this we need to just place in our txt method, txt not exist method, and now I think almost everything is perfectly fine. Just save it and build it. There should be no errors, and meanwhile we can check by refreshing on SQL level. So the build process is completed, and we can see the database synchronization is also completed. We'll just go ahead and refresh, and it should show us the two tables which we have created. Yeah, and these are our tables, and you can see the columns exist here, resort table, and type, location wise and cost wise, and then there is a name field also, and resort group ID, which is a foreign key, and there is a primary key here. So, and there are other nodes also, specifically this index node. So but the relationship is already defined there on the EOS service level. And here also we can see the table resort group is there. Resort group ID, name, and data area ID partition are already created as a part of uh, system, and rec ID, rec version, and then we enable these in as a properties on the table level for the audit purpose. So these fields are also created there, and in this way we have achieved so far. I need to just recollect, summarize all the session. We created multiple labels. We created a table resort group. We understood multiple table level properties, and those properties were some properties were related with audit purpose, that is modified by modified date and time, and similarly created by and created date and time. And then there was a cache lookup field, which is for caching or performance improvement when this table is used, and a cluster index where we use our primary index, and in the primary index also we choose the group index which we selected. And then in the table group, which we also covered in previous session, we selected group because this is a group level only few fields level table. So that also I covered in my previous session. And then of course the title field 1 and title field 2, and the label property. And also we covered methods which must exist in a table. It is not mandatory, but this is a good practice to introduce these methods, because these will be then later on used for your coding whenever you will be using these tables. So these methods will be used. And index is for duplicate, as a unique key, alternate key, because as we discussed that primary key is rec ID based, so we need to declare this as alternate key. And then there was a field which we place, that is a resort group ID, and we also made it a mandatory field here. And we also made it like whenever uh, AllowEdit is no usually, but on first creation of record it should be yes. So this is how we created, and we used existing EDTs, and we discuss about how which one should be mostly used whenever you will be creating the fields. So we use here the name EDT, and then in the group we use uh, you know our own extended data type. And then on the EDT level also we extended this one with the sys group EDT further. And the resort ID we did not extended it further, and we directly use it. And similarly there was a table references which we discuss here, and in the table references we also put the label and help test for these. And then a reference table was defined first, and then in the table reference we created a new relationship of EDT with our that refer table here, reference table here. And we use to select that field on that related table. And this is how we define this relationship on a EDT level. And in this way we have also checked, there were field groups which we discussed. Those are logical grouping, as well as when you place field groups on a form level, so that will also present in a good way, like all logical same fields should be combined and put in the same place. It provides a logical segregation, which is very good for user interface, because we need to group the information or group the objects in the real world as well. So in this, overall we have covered a majority of things, and that will just conclude our this session, and then we will also do certain sessions in future as well, because this series will continue until most of the concepts in X++ and data structures in D365 FinOps are covered. So thank you very much for staying tuned, and for subscribing the channel, and for sharing the videos, training videos, and it's very helpful for other who wants to learn, the persons who wants to learn. And there are so many friends who are contacting me in order for seeking guidance, and to suggest further topics which they need for guidance on those topics. So basically I will be also, because these training sessions were also based upon certain feedback from friends who were asking for to clarify the basic concept in X++. So I hope the experts already know these concepts, but for the newcomers who want to learn ERP and customization, this is very important that they need to understand the basic structure in use in D365 and X++, and what are the best practices. I think I am hopeful that this will be very useful. And thank you very much, guys, and stay tuned for the next training videos, which will be also coming soon. Thank you.